How are we doing, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in this video, we're going to be talking through one of my favorite segments of the week, our must-buy running backs here for Week 11 fantasy football. We are getting very close to the fantasy football trade deadline for a lot of leagues. There's actually a good chance that some of you may have already passed this marker. Now, I do know that the kind of standard deadline for ESPN leagues this season, which is a large majority of the overall volume of the fantasy space, is December 1st, so we still have some time here. We've got the month of November to continue making moves for rosters, but we're getting into crunch time here, so definitely feel the urge and kind of feel some pressure to make a move for your team if you're in a position to do so. As always, if you have any questions about your lineups, your teams, or any trade advice, put that stuff down in the comment section below, and I'm happy to get back to as many of you as I possibly can and get you pointed in the right direction here moving down the stretch of this season. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode and talk through some of these 5 players. All right, so in this episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about playoff schedules and strength of schedule for the rest of these players' fantasy seasons. Starting out with Alvin Kamara here, of course, this being a player that does have that really favorable playoff schedule. We'll talk about that a bit more in just a second here. But for Alvin Kamara, there is a really nice buy low opportunity. His stock has definitely dipped the last couple of weeks, and he's had kind of a frustrating season from starting the first kind of half of his year out very quietly, having some injuries, not being available to play on Sundays, and then to kind of transitioning into a couple of very high ceiling weeks. Now we've definitely started to kind of ride the roller coaster back down to the dipping end of things on a downturn here as of late the last couple of weeks. So for AK, there is definitely a lot of room for improvement and growth. He has had 12 touches or fewer in both of his back-to-back down performances. And as I said at the top of this take, this is a player that has one of the better rest of season schedules for the fantasy playoffs of any of the rest of season top 10 running backs that I have ranked for this year. There's only a handful of guys that I would say have an above average schedule the rest of the way this season in that grouping, and Alvin definitely falls into and meets that criteria. So if you're coming off a back-to-back below double-digit scoring games in half PPR, that's just going to open the door naturally for some buy low opportunity. I would love to take advantage of this and move forward into week 11 with him as potentially the RB2 on your rosters. Ken Walker here, coming off of his first down game as a starting running back. Now, there's a couple of things working in the favor of fantasy managers looking to acquire Kenneth Walker. There is still the chance that if you're playing in a fairly casual fantasy football league that he is not a household name yet and doesn't necessarily have that same fantasy clout, if you will, that some other players, your Derrick Henrys and your Christian McCaffreys, Jonathan Taylors of the world have here. But the second thing is that as we get closer and closer to the end of this season and the bye weeks that are late here come into factor, this being a week 11 bye for Ken Walker, teams in desperation mode cannot wait. They simply cannot have or cannot afford to have the patience to sit on Ken Walker through this week's games and be able to come back on top on the other side of week 11 without him in their lineups, or at least that might not be their feeling heading into that week's game. Of course, you can always get a super lucky streamer and survive basically any situation, but you understand what I'm trying to say here. Ken Walker is a player that I am absolutely 100% bullish on going forward, and I think that that's fairly standard here for the entire fantasy community, at least those of us that are very involved with this here and want to continue to see players grow and obviously see what they can end up being in terms of their ceiling value down the stretch of a season. So for Ken Walker, the combination of that first down performance and the bye week creates a sense of urgency for some lineups that they just simply can't afford to withstand here. So having his first game under 10 points scoring in half PPR, that is a big deal. He did a lot of his damage through the air catching the football, obviously had just 10 rushes for 17 yards, but was able to tack on additional work in that receiving game that kind of saved his week here. And at the end of the day, is really what we're hanging our hat on. So try and take advantage of this. His price is probably going to be stingy still in a lot of leagues. A smart owner, I'll say this, a savvy owner is not going to sell you Kenneth Walker. Although he has just an average rest of season playoff schedule, it still isn't a situation that's scary enough that if you are a owner that has kind of a cushion in terms of having a safe, secured spot in the playoffs, or at least the way the standings look right now, in addition to the fact that you just understand what he represents as a player, you're probably not going to move off of him, but there will be situations and doors opened here in week 11. Travis Etienne, a similar situation. If you're a savvy player, you're not looking to move him, but he is coming off of also a very disappointing game here heading into a Week 11 bye. So a lot of the things we talked about with opening those doors of opportunity for buy low situations are present here with Travis Etienne. And this is by no means a true buy low. This is a buy slightly discounted. You're talking a 10 to 15% off coupon here. You're not talking a 50% off coupon that you were getting, if you will, that we were buying ETN for back in week 3. This is a much different situation. Now, Travis does have a better playoff schedule than Kenneth Walker. He has an above-average rest of season schedule and playoff schedule, which is very favorable for him, of course. And you want to have him on your teams here, especially in those PPR leagues, because he can do a whole lot of damage and bring a lot to the table. So for Travis Etienne, definitely looking to go out and buy him here. I would be willing to trade any fringe running back 1. I have Travis as my rest of season running back 6. I would also trade someone probably in that 8 to 10 tier if you had to, just for the simple fact that I do think his ceiling is that high and his skill set is extremely valuable to fantasy lineups. So I'm willing to sell a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, who's got a tough rest of season playoff schedule, a guy like Leonard Fournette also heading into a bye, but potentially depending on the valuation of him in your leagues. He did score a touchdown this week, which helps him. There's a handful of guys, or maybe a package deal, whatever the case might be. Put your questions, scenarios in the comment section below. I can help you guys out with that stuff. James Robinson here, moving into a player that is definitely not a high caliber player yet. I do expect some favorability for him here, and this actually leads into kind of a multifaceted take here. If you want to try and buy low for Michael Carter as well, I'm not going to terribly hate that. Coming off of a bye week here, neither of these guys command too high of a price. I do think James Robinson steps up this week and really continues to grow his valuation in this offense and grow his role for this team. That's why we're using him as the kind of cover photo for this take. The overall takeaway is an extremely favorable rest of season playoff schedule, like one of the best 2 in the entire league. There's one player or a set of players we're going to talk about here in a second. There's another potential opportunity, but for J-Rob, I do expect his snap count percentage to continue to rise here. I do expect that this Jets offense, that yes, they do have some tough opponents on the schedule that could make some negative game scripts. They've been competitive this year, so I'm not going to try and worry about that stuff too much. The overall rushing defense of their opponents is a bit lighter, and that's an area of opportunity for me. So I'm going to take advantage of J-Rob when I can here. Again, not going to cost you as much as the first 3 names on this list will, and definitely presents an opportunity where if you're just looking for a running back 3 or a lower end RB2 to play in your lineups, especially in those 10-plus man formats, you could find something here and potentially have your eye on someone with some nice upside down the stretch. And then last but not least here, David Montgomery. Now, this is a take that is very dependent on the health of Khalil Herbert. So we haven't heard anything concrete about his hip injury after the Week 10 game against Detroit. That's a big deal for me, though. In the fourth quarter, Herbert suffered a hip injury, and if he can't play, and if that injury turns out to be serious, and he were to miss time, this is the arguable best postseason schedule for a fantasy running back that's out there right now. I would rank it slightly ahead of the New York Jets right now. They're both 1A and 1B. If Herbert is out, David Montgomery begins to chart back into his role and usage from the 2021 season, which was absolutely fantastic. That was a great role for him to play in this offense, and he was getting about 19 touches per game. So that volume increase would be significant enough for me to have him as almost a weekly RB2 starter and a guy that you just don't want to miss out on having in lineups. So David Montgomery, take advantage of the situation while it's there. You're not going to have to pay much to get him because he hasn't been producing good. He had a great matchup this week and failed to successfully put up good points on the table, but this is a spot where you could get something worthwhile in return for, again, a very discounted price. It probably shouldn't even cost you a running back 2 because I think a lot of people look at David Montgomery as a running back 3 right now. So to recap, all players here with average or above average schedules for the rest of the season coming off of down performances in Week 10. Kicking it off with Alvin Kamara, again, that above average rest of season playoff schedule, back-to-back down games. Ken Walker, average rest of season schedule coming off of his first down performance heading into a bye. Same with Travis Etienne, that first down performance since his breakout, also heading into a bye week. Good rest of season playoff schedule. Michael Carter and James Robinson, lower end RB2s definitely have some utility, though. Both have standalone value in this offense, I think. Again, my suspicion is J-Rob takes precedence in this offense eventually, but both of them do have somewhat of a role here. It is the hot-handed running back approach, if you will. A really good rest of season schedule there. And then Montgomery with a fantastic rest of season schedule and the potential for his backfield mate to be injured and open up more work for him. So there are 5 buy lows for week 11. If you guys enjoyed, smash the subscribe button, like today's episode as well, and check out some of our other trade content going up on the channel today. We've got 4 videos going live, so make sure you don't miss any of them, and I will see you in the next video, which starts now. Peace out.